This month's Myth Hoard included a copy of the Exquisite Corp Dungeon, which is interesting as you see scrolling along. The problem that I run into it is what is called connectivity or reachability. I started playing original Dungeons and Dragons, and one of the first things I did was draw up what would be today called a mega dungeon. Well, that one I lost, but I have probably my second or third attempt at what you would call a mega dungeon. But after playing it for several years, no one ever got anywhere in the dungeon. It was nobody ever got below third level. And you have all these other levels and no one ever goes down there, and you go, why? I mean, well, I went through and I revamped and repopulated, and I've done that several times in this, and I've redrawn the map. And here's an example of one of the layers, one of the levels of my map. One of the things that you'll notice, and it's sort of highlight on this image, is because the staircases have little big red arrows on them. They show which direction they're going in, and that just happens to be an artifact of Campaign Cartographer, but they're important to this discussion. I did an analysis of trying to figure out why no one ever got anywhere in my dungeon, and it was connectivity or reachability. So when I went back to college and took some interesting math classes, and I remember this fun textbook, if any of you remember, it's discrete Introduction to Discrete Structures, and this was viewed as one of the most boring classes on campus when I was there, but I just fell in love with discrete structures because it told me how to calculate the reachability of a dungeon. Now, I seriously thought about doing the math and showing you how to do that. And then I go, yeah, not many people would appreciate the beauty of the mathematics of calculating the reachability of your dungeon. But you have to be a real math nerd to truly appreciate that, because you have to raise a matrice to multiple powers and determine when the matrix goes to all ones to determine the reachability of a directed graph, which is one way to represent the dungeon. So, but I started thinking, how do I solve this problem of people getting around in the dungeon? And I then took a look at, I think there may have been a fire drill, and I started thinking, if you look at a modern building today, and you look at, and maybe if you've heard horror stories about places where they lock the fire escapes and, these horrible things, and then you think about your dungeon. What would happen in your dungeon if you held a fire drill? Or there was actually a real fire and people and creatures had to flee the dungeon. How easy is it to get in and out of your dungeon? And so one of the things I went back and when I changed my dungeon significantly by adding a lot more staircases. And in fact, in what I call my big dungeon, there actually is almost a maze of staircases because you can get lost in the staircases. I know as a DM, there have been times when I'm going, where the hell does this staircase lead? Because I have to figure it out on the map. And I ended up adding in between levels. So I have a level 3, I have a level 4, I know I have a level 4A, which has, I think, 2 rooms on it. It was simply because I threw 2 rooms on the level. But the rest of it is hallways and staircases leading to other levels, because it allowed me to connect the levels at a much higher level, higher rate of reachability. So you could get from place A to place B. So when I saw this exquisite corp dungeon, and I go, yeah, it's beautiful. I love creating things like that. Creating a dungeon that is so massive and goes on, and I can appreciate the differences in style and the way they did it, but it's unplayable. Probably. I hope somebody can prove me wrong, but you'll never reach no player party will ever reach the back of the dungeon, because you have to go through all the other areas to get there. So if you do create a large dungeon, think about that. You want people to be able to get in and get out of your dungeon, and you want your creatures to get in and get out. And so you need to create more connectivity, or reachability is a better term actually, that you can reach that without the need to go through all these other rooms. And one way to do it is if you're building a dungeon with mine, where you have levels, which is the classic, you put levels in between that are mainly connectivity levels, so that I can add staircases and connect all the levels together, and figure out where the staircases would come up. And so you could actually do that if you want to do it that way. But you can get from the first level to the third level to the fifth level to the sixth level to the eighth level of the dungeon, just going through a few staircases, because that way you can get people deeper in the dungeon. Of course, then the other exception I have to this, which is another dungeon I have over on my shelf, called Hellwell. Anybody who's read of Roger Zelazny's Lord of Light, I was inspired by it and created Hellwell, where it is really, really easy to get from level to level, because there's a central corridor going down, spiraling down into the depths of the dungeon, and most everybody just gets terrified. And actually, the scary part is because it's you have this big open dungeon, and it's sort of designed to drain. You get a corkscrew spiraling down, and it's designed to drain, so everything slopes down to the deeper parts of the dungeon. Certain traps will set things off, which will roll down into the central corridor and down the central chasm, which will fall down and make noise. Like if you've in Lord of the Rings, the books, or actually it's even in the movie, where they knock something down a well and that makes all this noise, that it attracts things from the lower depths to come up. But that's a whole different set of adventures. But if you create your dungeon so that people can get from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4 quickly, you'll find that people will go to a level where they're comfortable fighting the creatures. If you're following the classic design, where the deeper in the dungeon you go, the harder the creatures or stronger the creatures are. I know there's some interesting ecological issues with that, but think about when you build your dungeons, and if you build a larger dungeon, how easy is it to get deeper into the dungeon? Because you want to be able to get deeper into the dungeon, because that's where, as a DM who loves creating maps and making complex traps and moving rooms and sections of the dungeon that move, you want players to come down into to experience your creation. But if it takes them 15 sessions to get through to the second level or the third level, they're never going to get anywhere deep, because you're never going to run a campaign that long. Life is too short. So give them some shortcuts. Or you can be nefarious and put teleporters, which will send them to various levels of your dungeon without them knowing about it. But I've done that, but you know, it's not always the best idea. It's better if the characters can plan to go when they make a conscious decision to go down deeper. Sometimes it's fun to move them down at levels lower than they are, or where they get lost. Having parties lost, wandering around, trying to figure out how to get out is great. And that way, if you do want to be truly nasty, you have staircases that go up, which actually can lead to places deeper in the dungeon. That's those you can do too, but it makes it more interesting for that. So when I saw the Exquisite Corp dungeon, and I said, "Oh, I think I've just built something like that before that no one will ever get to," and it's a beautiful piece of dungeon that put together by multiple people, and but I don't think it's a realistic dungeon to game in, simply because no one will ever get that deep and only another cartographer will appreciate it. So add some more staircases, add some more passageways, add some more secret passageways. Make it easier to get from level to level in your larger dungeons. If you like my video, press the thumbs up button. I'd appreciate that. Or if this interests you, you can always subscribe to my channel. There's a button right above. I look forward to hearing some comments. Tell me what you think about this, and I'll try and reply, and we can see if I'll do some more of these. Thank you.